To the surprise of exactly nobody, President Biden recently made a silly but understandable gaffe, and the Trump cultists at the Fox propaganda network attempted to pounce on it. But in so doing, they merely stepped on the proverbial rake on live TV, and it's hilarious. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe, and enjoy the video. So full disclosure, this story has very little by way of political or policy substance, but we're going to talk about it anyway, and it's going to be brief because it's hilarious, all right? And it all starts with President Biden. So it is well known that Joe Biden is a frequent maker of gaffes, and this propensity towards gaffery, or whatever we're going to call it, has only increased with age, and he's 80 years old. So he has some verbal blunders, as old people often do. Now, I'm going to play the clip of the particular blunder in question, and he's basically being asked a question about Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and the situation in Ukraine and the recent attempt by the Wagner mercenary group, which is aligned with Russia, to basically overthrow the Russian military and things like that. So we're going to play the quick clip, and then we're going to get to the real meat and potatoes of it, which is the Fox Propaganda Network's response. Let's hear from President Biden first.
It's hard to tell, but he's clearly losing the war in Iraq. He's losing the war at home. And he has become a bit of a fly around the world.
That's it. That's all it was. So he said that Vladimir Putin is losing the war in Iraq, losing the war at home, a reference to the Wagner group. Now, he shouldn't have said Iraq because Russia is not in the middle of a war in Iraq. He meant Ukraine. So he meant Ukraine, but said Iraq. The two countries, two iconic countries in which there have been iconic wars in, the past 20, 30 years. So, I mean, whatever, right? It's not like he said lettuce or tomato, right? He named another country well known for being the site of wars. So, obviously, whether you like Joe Biden or not, that's not a matter of substance. But Fox couldn't help themselves. See, when you're up against Joe Biden for all of his faults, the fact of the matter is he's had a pretty remarkable 2.5 years, both economically and legislatively and on matters of social policy. So it's hard to compete with Joe Biden in terms of accomplishments. They certainly can't prop up Trump, who is an objective failure compared to Biden on every metric. So what do? They pounce on this silly gaffe. This is Jesse Waters on the 5. He is a devout Trump acolyte. I think he's actually even taken, if I understand it correctly, I think he's taken Tucker Carlson's place in the Fox primetime slot. So they're trying to groom him to be the latest Tucker Carlson. He's just a smug douchebag. But listen to what he has to say when he attempts to mock Joe Biden.
His heart stops. Is Kamala Harris the president?
For a second, the president again. Right. And that machine is what's keeping this country alive. And then he comes out and he confuses Iraq with Afghanistan. Fine. Just don't send Iraq $800 million. Then he comes.
So do you see what Jesse Waters did? First, they're making fun of the fact that President Biden is apparently using a sleep apnea machine or CPAP machine for sleep apnea at night. There's I think it's 20% of Americans suffer from sleep apnea and use a CPAP machine. And again, Biden's 80 years old and in infinitely better physical health than Donald Trump, who, of course, has a terrible diet, is overweight, and is not known to exercise. Now, whether you like that or not, that's simply the fact. So I don't know why you would mock Joe Biden's fitness, even at his advanced age. But note what Waters does afterwards. So he comes out and he says, he confuses Iraq with Afghanistan. Afghanistan is also not currently experiencing a war in terms of Russian involvement. Okay, now in the past, Russia did have a presence in Afghanistan and during the Cold War, and you could make the argument that there was almost a proxy war between the U.S. and the Soviet Union at the time involving Afghanistan, and they backed Afghanistan, but that was decades ago. What Jesse Waters was talking about was Ukraine. He made the same damn mistake that Joe Biden did. Joe Biden meant to say Ukraine, said Iraq. Jesse Waters, while unpromptedly making fun of him for no reason, made the same damn mistake. He meant to say Ukraine and instead said Afghanistan. And you can almost see the collective tension. The quality of the clip is relatively low, but you can tell Gutfeld and Dana Perino and, well, I don't know if she's sober enough to recognize what happened. Judge Jean Pirro, they're probably thinking the same thing, like, oh, Jesse, you stepped on a rake, dude. Now, I don't think that that's necessarily an indictment of Jesse Waters' cognitive abilities. I consider myself exceptionally well-spoken. I misspeak all the time. We all do, right? Especially when you're having a fluidity of conversation. But I love the fact that Jesse Waters, well, Joe with his verbal gaffes, and then makes the same damn gaffe, which is embarrassing and hilarious, and Twitter is rightly making fun of him for it. So perhaps, Jesse, you should, I don't know, be a bit more humble, be a bit more understanding of the verbal gaffes that people make from time to time, especially one like this, where anybody can confuse Ukraine with a different country. Again, it's just whatever. But yeah, I love this moment. It's hilarious, and you should also join in the chorus of people making fun of Jesse Waters on Twitter if you have one.